are so excited to have Zech Feng with us from Dallas, Texas.
My name is Zach. I I live here in the Dallas area. I am I am an attorney. I work in-house at a company here that's located here in Texas, but we have international businesses across the globe. Just a little bit about myself to kind of set up my background. I'm an ABC, American-born Chinese. I was born right in the middle of the U.S. here in Kansas. I moved around a little. I grew up in the LA area, in SoCal, in Pennsylvania, and but most of my life actually was in the San Francisco area, Northern California. Um, I went to school at UC Berkeley for my undergrad, and then I went to law school in Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Worked a while there, and then I moved down here to Texas about 5-6 years ago. It's been great here. Got in touch with the church, got plugged in. I actually met my wife here on the worship team in the church, and we got married 2 years ago in the middle, right at the beginning of the pandemic. But it's been a fun experience, and I'm really glad to be able to be here and just share a little bit of my experiences with y'all.
Wow, that is quite a journey. Thank you for sharing. And you can relate to many of the teenagers here, some from Pennsylvania, and I came from New Jersey. So my daughter went to school in Pennsylvania, and then I'm in San Diego now, so pretty close to your, mostly where you started, right, in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, so it's been an incredible journey. Tell us more about your job as a lawyer, how you got interested in being a lawyer from your high school days and then into college and into your law school.
Yeah, actually, that's a very interesting question. To be honest, when I was in high school, I had no idea I was going to do something like law. In high school, I was most interested in math and in history. And what that turned into was I studied economics in my undergrad. And as I went through my college career, you know, things change. You discover certain things as you're going through school. And I found that pursuing economics as a longer term, perhaps career opportunity wasn't really what I had in mind. What I discovered is that I enjoyed looking at systems and rules and helping people to interpret them. So that sounds a lot like law, right? But let me give you a twist. The biggest influence that came from was actually from playing games. For all you guys out there who enjoy playing games, card games, board games, video games, you know that there are a lot of rules involved. And sometimes when you introduce people to new games, you have to tell them how they work and you have to help them along. So that was actually one of the things I thought about, like, hey, I really enjoy this. And then like step by step, as I thought about it, I was thinking, you know, law seems to be something that kind of fits with this. There are very complex rules and case law in place, and everyone somewhere is going to need help interpreting them and working through them. When I thought about that originally, I shared it with my family and my friends, and my aunt, who was an attorney at the time, she said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Because she's seen so many people enter the legal field and burn out right away because they weren't ready for it. So I said, that's very good advice. I'll take some time to figure that out. So I spent a couple years just kind of interning and working with a law firm and seeing if that was fit for me. Can I handle it? And I found that I could. It was very interesting. I worked with some very unique clients in case matter, but I think that experience really set me up very well. So I discovered that I could do that, and I just had to pursue it. So I went into law school. Moved out to Illinois to do that. And it was a jump for me. Had been in California at that time for almost maybe 16, 17 years in the Bay Area. So it was a real shift for me going out to Illinois, but I felt I wanted to challenge myself a little. I didn't want to be necessarily stuck somewhere just because I was comfortable. And I had a good opportunity to kind of connect with different areas. I was thinking like maybe Chicago would be a great place to go. But law school was a really great growing opportunity for me. Is where I really learned to be very consistent with my work ethic and where I developed an ability to actually get in front of people and speak. And even during then, when I was at law school there and I got connected with the local church, that's where I started being able to be more comfortable being in front of people on a church stage as well. So it was a really great learning experience for me. After law school, immediately after that, I worked with what they call the University Office of General Counsel. And that's basically, if you think of a school, a university, like a company, they always need help on the back end, on the legal side as well. So I worked with them for a year, and then I moved to the capital of Illinois in Springfield and worked for the Attorney General's office. And that is like the attorney group that serves the state government. In that group, I specifically served in the general law division, and we represented what we called the prison law unit. We were the defense attorneys for government employees who got sued at the state and federal prisons. So if a prisoner in Illinois thought they were getting mistreated, something was unfair, if they say a guard beat them for some reason, they might bring a lawsuit in court, and then we would defend the guards, the administrators, the nurses and doctors involved in there. So that was a huge learning curve because we were thrown right in, and there's a lot of work, but it was actually a really good experience because not many young attorneys get the ability to have manage their cases like that and go into the court and argue before the judge and jury. So I spent 2 years doing that. And then I had the opportunity to come down here to Texas and join someone I had worked with before at my current company now. The company is called YCOZ. And right now I am corporate counsel. It is my sole purpose is to serve the company. And most of what I do is I read contracts, I interpret them, edit them, make sure that the company is well protected in the business deals that we go into. And I also help with the company's compliance with government compliance rules and with governance. So most of what I do in the day-to-day is I'm at my computer and I read a lot of documents, and I communicate with people all around the world because we have a global team. So I'm communicating with our Europe team and Asia, and just helping them kind of get through their document and contract needs. And it's really fun. In my position, I get to work with a lot of the higher up officials in the company. So I get to see a lot of people who have so much work experience, in the industry. And I might not understand it myself because I'm from outside the industry and I'm relatively young, but I get to learn a lot just from watching them and seeing their interactions. So yeah, that is what I do in my current position.
Well, thank you, Zach. You have an incredible growing experience, and I can never imagine playing games. Actually will guide you and lead you into the legal field. I can imagine many of the teenagers do enjoy playing game, and they probably couldn't see how the game evolved into a career of law. So thank you for sharing that. So it was great that you have an aunt who was a lawyer. So for the teenagers out there, right, as you have interest in certain career, it's good to talk to adults around you to get their advice and their insight, because your aunt did warn you. Are you sure you want to get into law? And that's when you did the internship.
Yes,
that's fascinating.
Absolutely, take the advice of those around you, and at the very least, listen, because people aren't trying to mislead you. They're just sharing their own experiences with you, and maybe that's applicable to you. And so it's always good to have all that different insight.
Right. So you said you enjoyed math and then history. So that's also very unique, where you're both in the STEM side and in the liberal arts side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you study economics in undergraduate at UC Berkeley.
Yes.
And then that's when you started to explore into law and deciding to go to law school in Illinois.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's a really fascinating experience, because whenever I think of law, it has to be someone really good with writing and reading. And then also a lot of negotiation or persuasion, what are some qualities, both soft skill and hard skill, you consider as important for your law career?
Oh, that that can be all over the place, really, because there's myself, just as you described, my kind of interesting background. I think the key for me is just being consistent in what I do. Uh, Reading, you definitely need to be able to read a lot. So sometimes you have to take that. Sometimes you read very quickly. Sometimes you just have to be able to steadily do it, over some time. Um, I think being able to communicate with your clients, depending on who your clients might be. In my setting, it's the company, and I work with the officials in the company. In my prior job, it was working with the individuals, who were being sued and drawing connections with them. Even when you're talking to people on the other side, your opponents, you have to be able to connect with them on some level, so they know that this is just part of the process. You're not trying to actually be their enemy, right? This is the process. This is the job. Uh, Many of my friends who went through law school with me, they might have a different background, a different approach. Some of them went to law school because they like to argue, because they like being, in the courtroom, slamming the table, shouting with the other people. And that's one version of it. It's not necessarily my mindset, but that is one way that people can go. I believe in a little more laid back, peaceful approach to resolving the issues. So law school was really about teaching people, how do you approach a subject? How do you approach a matter? How do you think about it? Less than giving you the technical data and information. When you think about law school, you might think about memorizing a lot of laws, and you do memorize some, but it's mostly about how do you approach the situation.
Wow. So it's very, need to have someone very thoughtful, perceptive, and creative to think about how to solve the problems based on some policy and law. And at the same time, I see the importance of building relationship, because you see the value of really respecting each other, listening, thinking from each other's perspective, even though your goal is trying to win the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a really great word, is respect. Have respect for your coworkers, your clients, and even your opponents.
And this could perhaps segue into the few slides that you have shared, because that's going to talk a little bit about your unique experience. So perhaps you can, as you introduced briefly earlier, as we go through this background, highlight a few things that you didn't talk about from the next few slides.
Yeah. So some of the things I didn't really touch on earlier was I grew up in a Christian family. My grandfather was actually trained in Taiwan as a pastor, and he had a great story. But to make it very short, he came to the US to study graduate school, to study about agricultural science, because he wanted to take that and apply that to the mission field in Africa. Now, for him, he never actually got to do that. He never got to go abroad and do missions, but he did start a church in Kansas City for the local Chinese community, and they served there for 40 years until recently, when they were finally old enough, and we moved them down here to Texas to live with us, to be closer. So by growing up in the Christian family, it meant that I had a relatively stable upbringing. And I always say that my goal as a newlywed, when I think about starting my own family, my goal is to try to be as good of a parent as my own parents were. I don't know how to do that yet. I still have to discover that and see what that looks like. But I hope to be able to do that, just as they did.
So
like
your
I said,
family really set a good example for you, and that really make an impact for you.
Yeah, not to sound like I'm, raising myself up, but I would say I think they did a pretty good job raising the kids.
Yes, we would agree.
And I, of course, I would say not everything was perfect. It's very rare that you have a perfect situation. Of course, there are issues I can see, especially looking back in hindsight, but I think we can learn from those as well. And I always try to learn from that too. And as I grow older, I get to see my parents with more and more grace as well. So it's something to keep in mind. It's very easy to feel one way when we're young, but just remember that things change, perspectives change as we grow. Yeah.
And the magic word I just heard from you is to have grace. So that's also a word of encouragement for all of us here and the teenager to really give grace to our parents and our family members, because no one's perfect. And that's the beauty of the salvation story, right? Because Jesus helped to make us complete in Christ. Wow. So for those of you who are from SoCal, Kansas, Pennsylvania, and the Bay Area, please put in the chat and tell us your city that you can make some good connection with our speaker, Zach. Any other thoughts on this slide, Zach?
Yeah, like I said, when I came down here to Texas and I found my church here, CCCFC, I got placed on the worship team. You know how when you come into a church setting and people find out you might do one thing or another, say, hey, you should join our ministry.
Right.
That's kind of what happened to me, but I'm so glad it happened. And I was put on a team with this girl who played guitar and sang. And hey, lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, we got married 2 years ago. So
and the rest is history. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Must be a special wedding during COVID.
Yeah, we had it all planned out, and then COVID hit, so things got changed, and we became the first streaming wedding at our church. So we kind of helped set that precedent, how to do it on YouTube.
Very nice. And that's the same church that Teacher Ming is at. And was it Pastor Don or Pastor Lin officiating your wedding?
It was Pastor Don for us. Yeah.
Wonderful. They're all good friends. Say hello to them.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. So tell us more about your church and your faith background.
Yeah. So like I said, I grew up in the Christian family. So I always felt that it was part of me growing up, and that I had a very, I want to say I had a solid foundation. And I think many youth today feel the same way, especially if they grew up in a Christian household. The real challenge is once you hit college, because now you're out on your own. You don't have the constant family around you usually. And when you're growing up, oftentimes you go to church because your family went to church, right? And you were there because they were there. When you're in college, it's your own choice. So I had the same experience and almost a crisis in my own college years. My freshman year was fine. There was a church really close to my dorm, and I went there each week, and I was part of the on-campus ministry that they met once a week, and I got to go with them and do a Bible study each week. And the first year was great. But then in the second and third years, I actually moved to an apartment that was kind of farther away from everything. And as part of that, really, my own human nature took over, and I became very lazy. And it's like, the church is so far away. I could just listen to some songs on my own. And said, well, the ministry people, they're so far away. And I don't really have time on Friday to go. So for a couple of years, I actually wasn't involved in anything. And it's not like I didn't reject faith. I didn't reject God. I still felt like I believed in it, and that was what I grew up with. That's who I was, but I wasn't plugged in, and I wasn't involved anywhere. And it wasn't the best place to be. But then you move forward a couple of years, and there was a big senior student outing. The ministry, they did a big outing each year, and bless some of the friends that I had. They remembered, I was still a person. I still existed. They invited me to go. I was like, okay, it's been a while since I've seen them. I'll go. And when we were on this outing, it was like a big rental house by a river, and they were just talking. Say, hey, how are you doing? How are you with your faith and church? And I just struggled so hard because I was like, I hadn't really been anywhere in a while. And the more I thought about it in that moment, I felt so broken and useless, because to me, growing up in that, growing up with the faith, I thought what it meant to be a good Christian was to go to church and to, be with your community there, and to do check off these boxes that you're doing each week. So to me in that moment, I felt very broken and I felt like I had failed. And I started crying, and my friends, they kind of came around me and they prayed for me, and they said, you know, the first step you have to do is accept that people might make mistakes. And maybe the first step you have to do is forgive yourself. And it was through the discussion with them and thinking more deeply on it, I realized, you know, being Christian and walking in faith is not necessarily about checking off 1, 2, 3 box. It's more than that. And it's about letting ourselves be aided even in our failures. And that, you know, Christ came to save us and redeem us, even though we are broken, right? And we will remain human. We will still struggle and we might fail at times, but he still loves us, and we are still saved under him. So that's the epiphany I had at the end of my college years. So that helped me to really strengthen my own faith and what I believed. And it also reinforced the idea that I had, like, where when I go to places later, like when I went out to Illinois for law school, I felt it was very important for me to get plugged in then, because I wanted to be around a community, and I wanted to have I saw the importance of having people around me that can encourage me, you know, and be with me. So that's what I did in law school. I got with the church there. I was lucky enough to join their choir. Their church choir is an international church, and they had a very heavy gospel influence. So they were singing these great songs. So I got to plug in with them, I got very lucky plugging in with our campus ministry in law school. I happened to bump into the person who ran it very randomly at a church that I was checking out one week. And he was so great, so gracious, such a great friend, and a great group that I was with for those years that I was at law school. And then same thing when I moved after that to Springfield. I knew I had to find a church, get plugged in, and they helped me grow so much in worship ministry as well. But yeah, now that I'm here, like I said, when I came here, they kind of pulled me in. They said, "Oh, what? You play piano? Here, come here." And you know, one thing goes to another thing. And right now, I actually help lead the English ministry worship teams. And I also more recent years got involved with the youth ministry. Currently, my wife and I host Friday night high schoolers at our home, and we're very excited to see with the new school year how everything plays out.
Wow, that is just so incredible to hear your faith journey. And as we're talking to teenagers and families here, more kind of a great forward-looking, come in your college year, you may face similar challenge. And what Zech just shared is so powerful, to acknowledge that we're sinners and we do wrong things, and don't think that we can ever be good enough to keep the relationship with God. And that's why Jesus came. So that testimony is so enlightening and help us to really watch out in the future, or even today. Some of you may even struggle today, and that what Zech shared can encourage you to come back to God, to come back to Christ. And it's a testing point in college that is no longer your parents' or your grandparents' faith. It is your faith that Zech, you have understood and accepted and reestablished that relationship with God, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And this is so powerful. Wherever you go, your first thing is to find your new spiritual home, your new church family that you can get connected. Through that, you worship God and you serve God and build relationship with others.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes.
And you enjoy working with your teenager. That's why you're here. This is just like back home. This is your extended youth group.
Yeah, I like the opportunity to be able to share just a little bit of what I have, and hopefully it's applicable.
Yes, I think it's very relevant. And then your interest, you told us about games. I'm sure many of our teenagers are interested to hear about these.
Yeah, these are just my kind of my interests and my hobbies. I've always considered myself a nerd, and that really came out, especially in law school. With actually, just like I part of my story was I like seeing all these game rules, right? A lot of my friends were the same way, and they were maybe even more into it. So we got the opportunity to play a lot of board games. If any of you know the card game called Magic the Gathering, I love that game. It's very complex, a lot of rules, and that's part of the beauty of it. um, uh, any kind of video games, console or computer, and I like just entertainment, watching shows, movies, uh, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, anything sci-fi related. I love watching. And then during the fall season, I'm really into college football. I started at Berkeley when they were an okay team, pretty good. Now they're less than pretty good, but I remain committed. You can see my sign. You might see up here. It says "Go
Yeah,
Bears." That's
right.
where Berkeley. Um, and then I also like following along with fantasy football. That's another kind of nerd game almost. And of course, now that I'm married, I do enjoy spending time with my wife, and we really love cooking when we have the opportunity to discover new dishes. We're not that great, but we're having fun with it.
That's
Uh,
important. Having fun and building relationship through cooking and enjoying the food.
mhm. Sometimes we like to invite people over and just try to cook a lot with them, almost experimenting. They have to be our lab rats to test our food, but so far it's been okay.
Awesome. Hopefully you share some favorite recipe with us as well. Wow. So I
Yeah,
encourage you, if you have any questions, do put into the chat and we can address them at the end. Go ahead, Zach.
yeah. I was just saying, find an easy recipe to follow online, and take talking about recipe, take it with a grain of salt.
Right?
Try not to. You don't have to follow it too closely, as long as you're having fun with it.
And be creative, huh?
Hmm. Hmm. Don't
Right.
be afraid to
Wow,
test new things.
yeah. So that actually now takes us to get to know Zach. And he was so gracious to actually use this 5P model that we have all learned in the few sessions I share with you, and use this 5P tool. See what Zach would share with us more on his 5P and what he discovered about himself and share with us.
Yeah, I was so excited to see the samples that you had sent over. Because when I was looking, I was like, huh, when was the last time I've ever broken down myself into these kind of categories? It was so interesting. And as I thought about it, thought about how do I fill this out, it really forced me to process through my own life and myself. And I kind of rediscovered who I was. And I think this is a very important thing for people to perhaps do every once in a while. So you are aware of who you are and where you are. So like, yeah, this pyramid, this 5P pyramid, and also the other model as well. So I'm not sure if I have this 100% correct. This is kind of my own interpretation of the
Yeah.
categories.
And
When I
you
look at
start
the
from the
very,
bottom on your purpose.
yeah, so what is the root purpose in my life? What do I feel really will be driving things long term? Okay. So my faith has to be down there, has to be at the core. If it's not built on that, then everything else will kind of fall apart. So I have on there to be able to grow closer with Christ. And there's so many different ways to do that, but that has to be one of the core goals, right? And then when I think about the question, because I sometimes I get asked or have the discussion, what kind of impact do you want to see from your life? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? You look at all these famous people, billionaires, and what kind of impact they're having, and how their names be recognized throughout history. For me personally, myself, I don't desire to have my name stamped in history. Like everyone has to know. I think that as long as I'm living a life now where others can see there's something different about it, there's something unique about it that separates it from the rest of the world, then I can say it's because of my faith. It's because I have this hope, undying hope in God and in Jesus Christ, and then that will be something that makes me happy. If I can be able to live like that, and if I have some kind of impact on someone, somewhere, anywhere, I don't even necessarily have to know about it. I think I will have done something good in my life. So it doesn't have to be world changing. Maybe you just influence someone to be a little happier with their outlook. I think that's important too. And sometimes it's really hard for people because they want to see something big and obvious. But I believe you just have to trust in what God has planned for you. So that's fundamental.
That is so humble with your mindset. It's not about you, is what I'm hearing. It's really about what God can do in you and through you. And Zach, what you're sharing today, not just the youth on the call right now, but also hundreds and thousands who's going to watch this, even though you may not know them, and yet you are making an impact. So thank you for sharing that purpose and beginning with the end in mind. And I think it's a beautiful purpose.
Yeah, I hope so. And actually, I just thought of an example where, well, what does it mean to live a life where somehow people see something different? Actually, back in law school, you can imagine it's a stressful environment. And a lot of times people are just so, drowned in the work, and it's overwhelming. Well, we had some international students who come to the program, and we invited them to come to our ministry meetings, dinner and meetings each week. I remember I was driving someone there one week, and it was very close to exam time, I think a midterm time. And we were just talking, and they were saying, how are you doing? How are you dealing with the stress? And I told them, I think I'm doing pretty well. It's a lot of reading and a lot of work, but I'm pretty happy with where it is and where I am. And I'm just glad to be going through it, making my way through it. And they actually asked me this. They said, Zach, how are you able to keep such an upbeat attitude all the time? And I had never really thought about it that way. I never really thought, oh, I'm so happy and upbeat all the time. But I guess somehow in the way I communicated and presented with this student, they saw that. And I took a moment to think about it. And I told them it really is because of my faith. I see that there's things bigger than this. There's things bigger than just this test and even school and the degree. And when I keep my eyes focused on that long term, then I can be at peace with where I am now. So it's those kind of interactions, those kind of moments that kind of show you what it means to have a life that other people can see there's something different.
That is beautiful. And that's how we should always be mindful. The way you live, the way you talk, you act, very naturally, people see how you could be different, hopefully in a positive way, and be a blessing to others. That's a great example. Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess moving up to the next level from the core purpose, I interpret that as, okay, well, now you have what are the principles, what are the kind of rules and guidelines that I'm building to make this purpose go. So number one has to be the Bible and God's word and the principles that come from there. That has to drive everything, just like the main purpose has to be with God, to grow closer with Christ. Now, what have I taken from that? Well, I think one of the main things, one of my strongest principles is just a sense of having responsibility and ownership of what I do. So if I made a certain choice, then I should follow through, right? Then if I made a mistake, then I should own that as my own mistake. That was me. And just being, I think one of the words I would use is being consistent in the way that I see my responsibilities and the way I treat others and treat myself. And then I think very important is to maintain a work-life balance. I especially kind of built that principle after my work with the Illinois AG's office, Attorney General's office. I saw so many people who got drowned in that work, and they had mental health issues. They just had to quit, or there's so many things that came out of that office because it was so high stress. And I promised myself there that I would always strive to maintain a good work-life balance. And I think it's especially important when you're having a family because you have to be able to spend time with those that are closest to you and those that you love. So those are the things that kind of drive me from the guidelines perspective, I think. Is that accurate? Did I choose that right?
Absolutely. These are your decision-making criteria, your value, and how it guides your choices and managing your time, talent, and treasure. That's beautifully said. Thank you. And hopefully in the future, we can have you back to share more specific examples and practical ways in putting the principle into practice. And we're hearing it and seeing your stories and your testimony, but I'm sure you have a lot more wisdom you can share. So that is beautiful principle. Thank you.
Yeah. So then the different passions that I have, I guess I kind of brought this in with like my interests almost.
Yeah.
So when I think about throughout my life, what have I always sought to pursue? And music has always been kind of there at the top of the list. It's one of the things again where you should listen to your parents, your elders. My mom dragged me into piano lessons. My mom dragged me into school choir and the band. And I didn't want to do it at first, but I really came to love it. And that's been something that's kind of a trademark of mine as I've gone through my different stages. And now I'm here leading a worship team. So I'm so glad that what I experienced as a child and what I learned as a child gave me the tools and the ability to worship God and to serve my community. So having some music is a strong passion of mine. My goal, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, to be able to raise a family and be as good of a parent as my parents were. That's what I hope to build and hope to establish. So it's not there yet, but that's right there in the back of my mind. And just because, like I said, my life has been riddled with different game things, game influences. So I just like to have fun, and that's part of keeping that work-life balance as well. Make sure that you have some fun in addition to the work that you're doing, and hopefully you can have some fun even while you're at work.
Exactly. And my ministry name Call to Work is really helping people doing and putting to practice what you're sharing with us and being different in a positive way at work. And people can see that Jesus did come to work with you. You didn't leave Jesus at home or outside the office door. And that you enjoy music and have fun too while you're serving other people. So passion is really what you love to do, even when you don't get paid. And that you just love it, even though your parents had to drag you into music and piano lesson, right? So this is such a good example for all of us here, the youth and the teenagers and family listening and seeing that, wow, we want to nurture and develop our passion. And what's fascinating for me to see in you, Zach, is that you're both left brain and right brain. You just know and love logic, the math and the rules behind it. At the same time, you like reading history and writing, and then you like music and just fascinating.
Yeah, I'm a little hodgepodge, all kind of all over the place.
It's a beautiful hodgepodge.
And I would share also with all our youth here, maybe a lot of you are also dragged into piano lessons or violin or orchestra, band, all those things. I hope that you love it. I hope that you're really enjoying it. But a lot of the people that I've spoken to, a lot of the adults and my friends, we all agree when we were young and we were taking lessons, we didn't particularly enjoy taking the lessons. But when we look back on it, we appreciate it so much. And we really love the experience that we had. And of course, we're all planning to put our kids through the same process. So, it's that perspective thing. So I hope you can appreciate it now while you're going through it.
Good. Yeah. And also have a fast forward looking view based on what Zach is sharing with us as he look back and then look at present and looking at the planning for the future. He probably wouldn't change a thing, would you, Zach?
No, I always tell people, it's a very common question, sometimes as an icebreaker, like if there's one thing you can change, what would it be? Right. And I tell people that's so hard to answer. I generally would say I don't want to change anything because everything that's happened, good and bad, has led me to where I am now. And, you know, this is, I believe this is where I'm meant to be. And this is how things are playing out. If I change something back there, who knows where I would be now, right?
Right. I so agree with you. That is profound. Now we finished the internal soul searching, knowing your purpose, principle, and passion. Let's go to the external world, outside world. Let's talk about your people and performance.
Yeah. So my people section. So I listed how do I interact with people around me. I find that I'm a pretty patient person, and I put usually because again, we're not perfect. There's probably something that might trigger something, but I find I'm generally pretty patient, and I listen generally pretty well. I think it's a very important skill because that's how people are able to connect with you. But when you start listening to them, it's not all about you sharing about myself. Learn about other people. And when they feel comfortable, when they know that you are engaged with them and interested in them, that helps you build so many more bridges, right? And that kind of skips to that last one right there. Just that's the way to care for people, to be able to know what they're going through, that they know that you know what they're going through. And then I put a strong emphasis on being committed, on a kind of a sense of loyalty, almost consistency with who you're dealing with and the community around you. If you are, like we have at our church, we have what we call on the English side, home groups. And those are kind of like the small groups for churches. We have a group of about 8 to 10 people right now in our group, and we come together every week. We share our life with each other, and we all often ask ourselves, well, what is the purpose of this group? You know, what are we doing together? And we always say we're trying to share life, build those connections, and support one another. We are committed to caring and supporting one another. I say, if something comes up, if there is an issue that arises, these are the people I know I can count on, because we've grown closer with each other, grown closer as friends and as a church community, brothers and sisters in that way. So yeah, that's what I believe is really important in building those people connections. And I hope I've been doing that well myself in these areas. And being patient and being a listener also will help you in the workplace and in school, in your academic and professional careers. That will really help build connections there as well. And when you build connections within your work, I think that helps you so much, right? Yes. One of the keys that I found when I worked at actually all my previous workplaces is just being a friendly and taking the time to stop and talk to and listen with the administrative staff, right? You walk in the front door, there's someone there who greets you. Take some time to talk with them, right? To know how they're doing. Maybe you have a secretary who's assigned to helping you with different things. Take time to talk with them. You know, don't just use them for their job tasks. Get to know them as a person, right? And that you'll make a new friend, and they will be so much happier to assist you in your work things, and things will go so much smoother. So I think that's also important in those fields too.
Wow, Zach has so much wisdom he has shared with us, and I can imagine he can go on and on. I'm going to hope to work out a schedule that you can come back again, because we won't have time to talk about the next two on SWOT, but even in the people section, I know you can further expand on. And it's so true. People don't care how much you know until they know how much Zach cares. And I can feel and I can see and hear from your stories and from your life that you truly put this into practice. That is so powerful. And then let's go to the top of the pyramid, your performance in the remaining couple of minutes.
So performance, after building up this pyramid and seeing, the internal external markers here is so helpful. I felt like, well, performance must be then what do people see on finally, what do they see on the outside? So this is kind of a wrap up of where I've been, my career. I'm what they consider an in-house attorney. I don't work for a law firm. I work for one single entity, one company. And I consider myself very lucky to be there. When you talk to a lot of lawyers, they will tell you, oh, in-house is where you want to go. That's their goal. after working long, hard hours in the law firm. I've been lucky enough to have that kind of environment from the beginning. So I really appreciate the opportunities that I've gotten and my continuing career now. I'm over 5 years here at YCOZ, and the company is growing, and I'm very excited to see it grow and see how our legal team can grow to continue supporting them in that process. But academics, I know it's very important, especially for all the kids here, being focused on the academic performance and where you're going to go and what you're going to achieve through there. So I'm very glad I've been able to go to these schools to go through that and to do relatively well through those times. I will say I personally feel as if the academics they don't mean as much the further along you get. So I think that's another, perhaps if you want to take a forward-looking perspective, it's good to do well at what you're trying to do, but don't put so much into it that your eternal hope is in your school performance, because there's so much more to it, especially as you go beyond. Right now, I'm doing a lot with the church. I'm serving and leading the worship team, helping with youth ministry. I serve as a deacon for the English ministry as well. So there's a lot to do. And I couldn't do it without the support of my community and my wife. Oh, I'd be so lost without her support right now. And sometimes it feels like it could be so much, but there's a reason that we're doing what we're doing. And it's so much easier to do it with the community around you. And for myself, one of the things that I try to do to keep myself consistent is to have the daily devotional time. And what's really great, last year for Christmas, my wife got me a Bible in a year chronological Bible. So you read it and it tells you, it splits up all the Bible passages in the order that they supposedly happened chronologically. It gives you that in a daily devotional manner. So I've been going through that each day this year, and that's been such a wonderful tool and a new perspective on the writings in the Bible too. So those are my performance aspects, I think.
No, that is beautiful. That is so true. Outside, what do people see? But it all came from your internal that we just went through in your pyramid. Just a clear definition of your purpose, principle, and passion, and how you interact with people. And everyone wants a good performance, but you don't just jump to the pyramid like that. It's really through the layer that Zech has gone through with us. And I can see your middle name is committed, because you're very committed, and your middle name is consistent. You're keeping it very consistent throughout. And I hope for Zech to come back and share the second tool. Zech also summarized and reflected on his strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat. And I hope to invite you back to share with us. Is that okay, Zech?
Oh, I would love to. And I think even if I get the chance to share this, it'll help me grow myself as I'm thinking about it.
Yes. So let's arrange with Teacher Ming so that you can come back and share with us again. So let's see if there are any questions in the chat room, because we want to learn more how you went to law school and how is your current work experience like. And I can hear, so it's actually a semiconductor company, just like Teacher Ming worked on Texas Instrument and I did in AT&T Microelectronics. And Teacher Ming will talk more about the microelectronics side of the business, but Zech didn't study semiconductor, and yet he worked with people in semiconductor industry, isn't it?
That's true. That's true.
Right. So I hope for you to come back, because I want to hear about your SWOT and the learning together as you reflect on it. Are there any questions for Zech from what you heard today? I have learned a ton. I am so grateful for every aspect that Zech has shared with us. And especially, I have no clue about all the games that you talked about, but I'm sure our teenagers do. Okay, so are there any questions from anyone in the audience? And we're coming to the end of our time. I'm very happy to have so many of you with us today. I'm curious
happy to answer anything.
Yeah, I'm curious if anyone thinking about the law as the career in the future. So here's a question, Zech. You see, what did you learn in law school?
Oh, wow, that's such a big question. besides all the different laws, there's so many law categories. You know, there's constitutional law, criminal law, property law, environmental law, intellectual property law, contract law. You know, it's all the different things. You have to go through all of them. But the most important thing in law school is they teach you how do you approach things. You read so many cases. You go through all these case books that are so thick every class. You read so many. It's how do you read it? What do you take out of it? How do you interpret and apply it? And some of the more important classes are probably more practical, you know, writing classes, advocacy classes, which means you're kind of pretending that you're in the court process and you're writing arguments and you get up and you argue them in front of people. How do you go ahead and do that? I think those are the more important aspects of going through law school. Just that really quick follow-up, how can you remember all the laws? You don't. As time has gone by, there's been better technology. So it used to be you had to read a bunch of encyclopedias of case books. Now you can go online and search it with the right system. So you don't have to remember all of them, thankfully. The question, what did you major for undergrad? I majored in a special, actually a hybrid major. It wasn't just economics, it was called environmental economics and policy. And it was a new kind of venture between our natural sciences college and the letters and sciences college at Berkeley. So they kind of came together and they offered this new co-major almost. So it's economics, but with a slant on environmental topics. And I also, I didn't mention, I minored in music because I decided to take some music classes for fun, you know, like kind of here's a singing class and here was a history of jazz class for fun. And then by the end of the 3 years, going to the 4th year, I realized I'm this close. I can get a minor if I just do like this. And I played trumpet in junior high and high school in the band. And I said, okay, I could join their band and I can, you know, take a semester, play with them. Ta-da, I have a music minor.
Well, that is a great conclusion of